Okay, so shalom. Okay, so pretty much so, right? There's a lot of talk that the Bible doesn't work. Okay? There's a lot of talk that the Bible doesn't work. And so I gave you some homework, right? Not really homework. Kind of like some pre-study, right? And I only wanted you to read 14 verses. I wanted you to go to Deuteronomy 28, and I wanted you to read verses 1 through 14. So, what I need you to understand is that verses 1 through 14, right? Verses 1 through 14 are pretty much the blessings. The blessings if we were to follow all the commandments of Yahuwah Elohim. Now, it's referring to the black people, but it goes for anybody, because anybody can follow the commandments, and when you follow the commandments, then blessings come to you, right? But there's something that I wanted you all to understand, okay? In Deuteronomy chapter 28, the blessings are only 14 verses. Deuteronomy chapter 28 has about 68 verses. And verses 1 through 14 is talking about the blessings. And verses 15 all the way through verses 68 is talking about the curses. So what I need you all to understand is that Deuteronomy 28 is a prophecy. It's not a what if, but a prophecy. Now, there are black people that here in America that are reaping from the blessings of Deuteronomy 28. Why? Because he has servants that follow the commandments. Okay? So, some blessings came in my life, right? And blessings have come into other people's life as well. But I want you all to pay very careful attention to something, right? Because at the end of the day, one thing that you have to understand is that we're all still here in a strange land. Every black man and every black woman is here in a strange land. And many of you out there, you look and appear as though that you're blessed. But you're not blessed. You have handlers. You think that you're blessed. Many of you are only being blessed right now by Satan. So I want everybody out here to understand that if you're somebody out here, don't get caught up on social media. Don't get caught up on television. If you're somebody out here and you can't figure why things may not be going in your direction, do understand that there's either two reasons. One reason is you're just not applying yourself hard enough. And the other reason could be because you have a specific virtue that won't allow you to do certain things to make $1. Okay? Which would land you underneath the curse. Which would land you underneath chapters. Which would land you underneath verse. Which would land you underneath verse 15 to 68. Okay? Now, I want everybody to understand something, right? Because many people out there, they say that the Bible doesn't work. The Bible doesn't work. I'm only speaking about black people. I'm not talking about the other nations necessarily. Because when people say that the Bible doesn't work, in most cases they're talking about financial stability. In most cases, in many cases. Some people may have lost a loved one. Some people may have lost a child. Some people may have lost their mother. Some people may have lost their father. Some people may have lost their sister. Some people may have lost their husband. Some people may have lost their wife. And they say, well, what's going on here? You know, why didn't God, just because you've been born in life with your deck of cards, does not mean that there's not a God. I want to repeat that. Just because you're born, just because your husband passed, just because you have problems in your family, just because you may have lost a child, just because you may have lost a mother, just because you may have lost a father, just because you may have went into bankruptcy, just in case you must have did this or you must have went through that, that does not mean that there is not a God. That does not mean that there's not an Elohim. It's just the cards that you've been dealt with. And we're at the point now, we're in a situation now where many of us have to pucker up and we have to be strong, because whatever cards that we're dealt with, we gotta stand by them. We gotta stick by these cards that we're being dealt with. Okay. So I want to start this off. I want to tell most of you why the Bible isn't working for you. Okay, and I want you to listen, and I want you to listen very carefully. It says 2 Timothy 3:16. 2 Timothy 3:16. All scripture. Now, this might not make sense to many of you first, but as I continue out with the message, then many of you are going to understand. It says 2 Timothy 3:16. All scripture is breathed out by Elohim and profitable for teaching, for reproof, for correction, and for training in righteousness. All scripture is breathed out by who? All scripture, everything inside this Bible has been breathed out by the Almighty, all of it. There's not one thing in this Bible that, well, I'm going to get to that. Okay? But let me read this again before I go on to my next scripture. I'm going to tell you all why the Bible isn't working for a lot of you, okay? Because spiritual things must be spiritually discerned. Now, I want you all to listen carefully. It says here, all scripture is breathed out by God and profitable for teaching, for reproof, for correction, and for training in righteousness. So, now that we know that this here, everything that has been profitable, everything that has been breathed out in this Bible, everything in this Bible, we know now is from God, right? And it's profitable for teaching, for reproof, for correction, and for training in righteousness, for training to become righteous. So now we know that, right? Let's go to 2 Peter chapter 1, verse 21. This is 2 Peter chapter 1, verse 21, right? 2 Peter chapter 1, verse 21, right? And it says, for no prophecy was ever produced by the will of man, but men spoke from God as they were carried along by the set-apart Spirit. Now, listen carefully. For no prophecy has ever been produced by the will of an ordinary man. Nothing in this Bible, no telling of the future, none of these things have ever been produced by the will of an ordinary human being. But men spoke from the Almighty. We speak from the Elohim, from the power of Israel. We speak as we're carried along by the set-apart Spirit. Now, do any of you believe that? So, if none of you believe that Christ spoke through the prophets of old and spoke to the apostles. If none of you believe that, then you can go ahead and leave this message. Because if you don't believe that, you got to understand that it's going to get a lot trickier. Okay? So if you don't believe that, it's going to get a lot trickier. All right? So now, let's go to John chapter 5. Okay? Let's go to John and let's go to chapter 5. And I'm going to really open this out here. Okay? John, chapter 5. We're going to go down to verse 30, okay? Now, what I'm about to read to you all is extremely important. So many of you want to know why the scriptures don't work. If you pay careful attention, you're going to see why the scriptures don't work. Okay? You're going to see why the Bible doesn't work for the majority of you. Okay? Okay? You listening? This is John chapter 5. I'm going to start at verse 30. And I'm going to read verse 30 all the way to the end. Okay? And not only am I going to read it to the end, but I want you to understand something. These are red letters. This is John chapter 5. And these are red letters. So Christ is the one speaking here. Okay? John chapter 5, verse 30. This is Christ speaking. Very important that you know that these are the words of Christ. Okay? And it says, I can of my own self do nothing. So Christ is standing here and he's talking to a bunch of niggas. And Christ is saying, I can of my own self do nothing. Now, a lot of people would like to take that and be like, see, man, I told you, man. Christ was just a man, dog. He told you right there, he of his own self can do nothing. Well, you have to understand what Christ is saying here. Remember what Christ was, right? Christ was an example, okay? It's very important that everybody remember that Christ was an example. He came down here in the flesh as a man so that he could be an ensample, so that he could be an example. That's why he came down here, to be an example. Okay? Many of you need to understand the importance of that. He came down here to show us how to live. Right? One of the things that he showed us was to be upright and was to be fearless. Right? But I want you all to listen. I want you all to pay very careful attention, right? He says, I can of my own self do nothing. I hear. You heard what he said? He says, I hear, right? I judge, and my judgment is just. So Christ said, I hear, and I judge, and my judgment is just, because I seek not my own will, but the will of the Father which hath sent me. Now, let me tell you something. I'm a thorough dude, man. I'm a very stand-up man. I don't think anybody can complain against that, right? I don't cherry pick the scriptures. Even though I preach the most dangerous commandment, that Christ is the living Elohim. Okay? I preach that. But I'm not going to skip over verses like this. Now, many people would just go and say, well, hey, listen, dog, he's telling you right there that the Father sent him. He can do nothing of himself, and blah, 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 and this and that, right? So, you know, you preaching Christianity and, you know, preaching that Christ is God and all of these things. I want you to, if you listen to this message all the way, then you will have a great understanding on why the Bible isn't working for many of you people, both men and women. Okay? All you have to do is listen very carefully, pay close attention, and you're going to get the full understanding of why this Bible isn't. Now, I went to the left with it. I didn't explain it the way people would have expected me to explain it. Okay? So now pay attention. So he's going to say, so now listen. Now you have to listen very, very, very carefully in order to understand this message. If you don't listen, you're not going to catch it. And I'm not going to keep going over and over and over again with this stuff. Okay? Because many of you now, your skill level is getting better. You've been listening to me talk, and I'm giving you a better understanding of the scriptures. And so many of you have a better comprehension of what's going on here in the scriptures now. So you should be a little sharper now. You should be a little sharper. You should be a sharper knife now than you once were, right? So I want you to pay attention. Now, well, just read. No. I want to emphasize how close you have to bring your ear. How close do you have to bring your ear? I want you to pay attention. Okay? He says, I can do nothing of my own. He said, I can of my own self do nothing. As I hear, I judge. So he's saying, as he hears, he judges. And my judgment is just. So he's saying, and my judgment is just. So as he hears, he judges. And my judgment is just. Christ is saying, as I listen, I pass judgment. And my judgment is just. Then he's going to say, so in other words, my judgment is correct. Then he's going to say, because I seek not my own will. Because I seek not my own will, but the will of Yahuwah, which hath sent me. So the example that Christ is trying to give to us ordinary men, the example that Christ is trying to give to us ordinary men, the example that Christ is trying to give to us ordinary men, the example that Christ is trying to relay to us ordinary men, the example that Christ is attempting to relay to us mortal men, is that we can do nothing of our own selves. Many of you across social media, you're confusing that no matter what you're doing, no matter what your development is, whether it be financially, whether it be physically, or whether it be intellectually, no matter your development, you can do nothing without Elohim. You can do nothing without Christ. Now, I'm trying to tell many of you right now, many of you are in great danger because you don't believe that. You don't believe that. But I want you to understand the twist in this scenario here. Because following Christ is not contrary to keeping the commandments, but following Christ is contrary to the blessings of Deuteronomy 28. I know y'all didn't get that one. And I know you don't believe it. Right now in these times that we're in, openly following Christ is not going to get you the blessings of Deuteronomy 28, verses 1 to 14. Are y'all following me? Damn. Wow. See, I want you all to really understand what I'm saying here. Following Yahushua HaMashiach is not going to get you the blessings. Openly following Yahushua HaMashiach is not going to get you the blessings of Deuteronomy 1 through 14. Now, I know a lot of people are not going to agree with that, but I want you to take a look around. Now, as you see that this so-called invasion of the Ukraine, right? You're starting to see some cracks in it, right? See, this is why I don't talk. When the rest of you niggas see something on TV, you like to open your damn mouth. That's the reason why I didn't speak about Ukraine. I said wars and rumors of wars. But I didn't speak about what was necessarily going on in the Ukraine. Why? Because I knew it was some foolishness. I knew it was some bullshit. When I told you all that, I explained to you all that everything is happening because of you niggas, but you don't believe me. Everything is happening because of you niggas. Whether it's falsehood or whether it's real. I'm not saying that there's not an invasion, but you need to understand what's going on here, right? Things are not what meets the eye. And you can't listen to everything that you hear either, because there's a whole lot of tricks behind things, right? You have to understand how Satan works, okay? Now, I want y'all to pay attention, right? So he's going to say, because I seek not my own will. So he's trying to let us know that we're not supposed to seek our own will, but the will of Yahuwah. So he's being an example, saying, listen, don't seek your own will, but seek the will of Yahuwah Elohim. That's whose will that you have to seek. Why? Because we're about to go home. See, many of you want to stay down here. I know that many of you got big fancy houses, and you're driving nice fast cars, and you having sex with a lot of beautiful hoes, and you got a ton of jewelry on, and many of you are probably beautiful, both women and men. You probably adore your looks, right? Narcissism. Many of you are just pompous because of your intellectuality. I understand these things. You love this world. You love it. This world is everything to you. Woe to you. Woe to you. Okay? Woe to you. Okay, for all of you Hebrew Israelites there, that your aim is to get the blessings, to get Moses' prosperity speech of Deuteronomy 1 through 14, you have to understand that ultimately, you still are in a covenant with Christ, whether your bitch ass want to believe it or not. Because many of you that are in the circumcision, you're cowards. You're always skipping the throne. Many of you constantly skip the throne. Why do you think? Because you think that if you skip the throne, you are not going to have to go into battle with Christ. You're terribly wrong. You have to understand that your blessings out here on the battlefield is going to come from the one that's down here on the battlefield with you, and that's Christ, not the Father. Hold up. Okay? It's Christ who is your immediate supervisor, commander-in-chief down here. You're not going to get the kingdom by being afraid of anything. Okay? Now, I want to keep reading, right? He says, if then Christ is going to say, now listen, Christ is going to say, if I bear witness of myself. Now, why is he saying this? Well, pay attention. Because he said, because see, I know y'all want me to move on, but I need to make sure y'all get this. First he says, we're in John chapter 5. First he says, I can of my own self. That's just like if I told you all, I of my own self, I can do nothing. Why? Because who's my power source? My power source is Yah. My power source is the Father, right? That's my power source, right? Weren't you and him and her and everybody created by God, created by Yahuwah Elohim? Of course you were. So that's the power source, right? So this is what a lot of you get misconstrued, because you say, well, see, Christ is admitting it right there, dog. He's saying that, he of himself can do nothing but listen. Because I'm telling you, he's making himself an example. So then he's going to say, I can of my own self do nothing. But he's going to say, as I hear, I judge. So, as he hears what? What is it that Christ is listening to? Well, we'll get to that in a minute, right? Right? He's listening to himself, but I don't want to complicate things right now. Okay? But us personally, we can't listen to ourselves, right? Because we can't lean on our own understanding. Why? Because our own understanding is an abomination, right? So he has to be an example, even though he's God in the flesh. He's down here, and he has to be an example. That's the reason why he called himself the Son of Elohim. Because if he said that he was an ordinary man, he'd be lying. So who is he? The Son of Elohim power. He's the Son of himself. But let's not make things complicated. Right? Pay attention. He's going to say, and my judgment is just. So he's going to say, so basically now he says basically, if I bear witness of myself, my witness is not true. See, now you understand why he says, if I bear witness. So Christ, being though who he is, he can't bear witness of himself. Why? Because I'm going to tell you why. Hang tight. Now, why can't Christ bear witness of himself? Listen, we're going to go to I could have went to the Torah, but I didn't want to go to the Torah. I'm going to go to Paul. Paul regurgitates the Torah. So this was also said in the Old Testament. But I didn't want to go to the Old Testament. I wanted to go to the New Testament. I wanted to go to Paul so that you can see that Paul was a master at the Old Testament. Paul knew the Old Testament front to back. So, what was said in the Old Testament that Paul regurgitated, which is the reason why Christ cannot bear witness to himself? Paul says in 2 Corinthians chapter 13, Paul says in 2 Corinthians chapter 13, the opening verse, he says, "This is the third time I am coming to you. In the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses shall every word be established." In the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses. In the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses. In the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses. In the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses shall everything be established. Paul got that from the Old Testament. So, Christ cannot matter of fact, let me go to the so y'all following me here. So Christ is now going to say, he's going to say, he says, so now, he's going to say, whoa, it's a little bit different. What? Okay, let me go back to the KJV. Okay. Okay. So now, Christ says, so what is Christ doing? Christ is following his own law. I'll be right back.